If you multiply x plus 2 times x plus 3, you can do FOIL. You just pair things. X times x is x squared. X times 3 is 3x. 2 times x, and 2 times 3, which is 6. And you get x squared plus 5x plus 6. Now, when you say factor, factoring is the opposite of this multiplication. So instead of asking you to expand this multiplication, you'll be presented with x squared plus 5x plus 6. And the question is, what is this a product of? What are the two polynomials that would give me as the product of? Okay. Now the simplest of these cases are when you have a trinomial with 1 as its coefficient. And in that case, we know that if it is factorable, it should factor as x plus some number and x plus another number. And then if you look at the way that the expansion will give you is that this 6 is 2 times 3, whereas this 5 is 2 plus 3, right? So what you see is that if you have these a and b's, then we know that a plus b should equals to 5, and b should equal to a times b should equals to 6. Right? And of course, in this case, it's either 2, 3, or 3, 2. It doesn't matter. If we choose 2 and 3, the answer would be that it's x plus 2 times x plus 3, which we already know to be true. Since x plus 2 times x plus 3 gives you x squared plus 5x plus 6, it means that x squared plus 5x plus 6 should equal to x plus 2 times x plus 3. So going the opposite direction is what we call factoring. Okay, so let's try some other examples. Say if you have x squared minus 6x plus 8. How do you factor this? Again, the secret is to find two numbers whose product is 8 and whose sum is negative 6. Now, if two numbers are to add up to negative 6, at least one of them should be negative. And since their product is equal to positive 8, it means that they both have to be negative in this case. It's pretty important that you first think about the sign of each number, because sometimes you end up with a conclusion that one is positive and the other should be negative, whereas in our case, we know that they're both negative. In some other cases, we know the two numbers are both positive. And this is something that you should think beforehand, okay? So we are looking for two negative numbers whose sum is negative 6 and whose product is 8. In such a case, forget about the minus for a moment and just think about two numbers that multiply to 8 and add to 6. Okay, forget about the minus. So how do you choose such a number? Well, fortunately, 8 is either 8 times 1 or 4 times 2. And then the next one is 2 times 4, but we don't care because that's same as 4 times 2, right? So think about how many ways that you can make this last number as a product of two numbers. And for these, you add them up and you get, if you add them up, you get 7, whereas if you add them up, you get 4 plus 2, which is 6. So this actually does work, right? So if you decide that 4 and 2 are the two numbers that add to 6 and multiply to 8, now because we know that these should be negatives, we know that A should be negative 4 and B should be negative 2. And indeed, negative 4 times negative 2 gives you 8, whereas negative 4 plus negative 2 gives you negative 6. And therefore, we know that this should be factored as x minus 4 times x minus 2. Note that it's also possible to choose negative 2, negative 4, in which case you would write this as x minus 2 times x minus 4, but that's same thing as this, so you really don't need this. Okay, so that's the answer. That would be what you get if you factor x squared minus 6x plus 8. Now here's another example. If you have, say, x squared minus x minus 12, how would you factor this one? This time you're looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 12 and add to negative 1. Now observe that the product is negative, which means one of them is negative and the other is positive, right? So it's important that you first figure out the signs, and then what you do is, since one's negative and the other is positive, when you subtract the two numbers, you should be getting a 1. Okay, see, if you have something that's positive and then something that's negative, adding them is like subtracting because one of them is minus, right? So in this case, what you should look for is two numbers that multiply to 12 and whose difference is equal to 1 or negative 1. Okay, so that's how you approach it. So what two numbers multiply to 12? Well, 12 is like 12 times 1, 6 times 2, and 4 times 3. And I believe that's the only way you can factor this. So just make sure all the divisors of 12 is present here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 12. Those are all the divisors of 12. So these are the only ways that 12 can be represented as the product of. Okay, the difference here is 11. Difference here would be 4, and here the difference would be 1. So this is the right one. So it means that one is 4 and the other is 3. Which one should be negative? Well, 4 should be negative because negative 4 plus 3 will give you negative 1. So we know that these two will be satisfied by negative 4 times 3 equals to negative 12, and negative 4 plus 3 equals to negative 1. And that would mean that you have x minus 4, x plus 3 as the factored form of x squared minus x minus 12. And again, you could have chosen a to be 3 and b as negative 4. In that case, you would just have the factored form as x plus 3 times x minus 4. These two will be switched, but that's equivalent to what we have here.